Hey, what's going on, B-Wood? We are in our final week of our series called Waitlisted. For the past couple weeks, we've been talking a lot about this one word, and this one word is waiting. We've talked about waiting during really difficult times, and for the past couple weeks, we've been talking about how God has a plan, but we might have to wait for it. We also talked about while we were waiting, God is still faithful. And last week, we talked about while we're waiting, understand that God is listening. And so, if we're honest with ourselves, there comes times in our lives where we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And in that waiting process, we sometimes just get tired. Sometimes we feel like everyone's against us. Sometimes we feel like we're carrying something so heavy and it seems like no one is there to help us. And in reality, if we consider this for a moment, when it comes to waiting, there's sometimes that we just want to give up. There are many reasons why we want to give up hope, and maybe we've been trying so hard and there doesn't seem to be any change. Maybe we've tried to make right choices and the people around us don't really support the choices that we're trying to make. Or if we can be honest for a second, maybe we're waiting for things to happen in our family. In our family, things are messed up, things are going wrong, and nothing really seems to be getting better. Especially when we feel alone, if we can just be honest for a second, or unsupported, or even abandoned by others. It's not always easy to believe that we can keep going if we've already spent so much time of our life waiting for that situation to change. You see, but if there's anybody in Scripture that knows about this, he's actually one of my favorite people in the Bible. It's the story of Joseph. And if you've grown up in church at any amount of time, you've heard the story of Joseph being talked about. But for time's sake, I'm going to summarize the chapter. Genesis chapter 37. We're going to be heading there, and I encourage you to read it in your own time. But in Genesis chapter 37, here's the story of a 17-year-old boy by the name of Joseph. And Joseph is at the age where some of you kind of fall in. You're 15, 16, 14, 17 years old. And he's at that age, and he, like many of you who think, he is his father's favorite. He's his father's favorite, and it was pretty obvious because Jacob loved Joseph so much that he gave him this special coat. This special coat was supposed to be for the firstborn, but Joseph was actually one of the youngest. And I can imagine how awkward things had gotten during this time when Joseph was going on. And to make things even more awkward, God began to speak to Joseph, and he began to speak through him through dreams. And these dreams were one day Joseph was going to rule a nation. And he was going to rule a nation, and he was actually going to rule over his brothers. Now, I don't know about you, but if you have a younger sibling, you kind of throw your guard up when maybe your younger sibling says, "Oh, I'm the boss of you." No, you're not. You're not the boss of me. I'm older. I'm in charge. What I say goes, right? But that's exactly what Joseph did. He goes to his older brothers and he says, "Listen, God spoke to me. God shared with me something so amazing." He says, I'm gonna be your ruler one day. And so instead of keeping all this information to himself, instead of keeping it just by himself, Joseph shared it with his brothers, and he began to make things pretty awkward. And instead of taking the hint that his brothers didn't appreciate what Joseph was saying, that someday he would be his boss, Joseph kept telling his brothers about the visions that he had from God. As we go on in Genesis chapter 37, we find that the brothers had finally had enough of what it is that Joseph was saying. And they decided to get rid of him. At first, they had planned to kill him, and that was the plan. They thought that they could create this divisive plan and say, "Hey, he's gone. We don't have to deal with him anymore." But one of the brothers convinced the others to spare his life, and they actually sold him into slavery instead. And even, I guess it's an improvement over murderer. I can imagine that this brother who decided to sell him into slavery was anything but a hero. I mean, I want you to second for the next couple moments to just kind of put yourself in the shoes of Joseph. I want you to think about everything that Joseph was going through. When he realized that his own family hated him. What's going on in the mind of Joseph when he realized that he was going to be thrown into a foreign country at a young age where he didn't know anyone? What was going through the mind of Joseph as he's traveling in this van, waiting to find out where he would end up and how he will be treated when he arrived? For anyone, that's enough uncertainty and loneliness to make people give up hope. But that's not even the end of Joseph's story. In chapter 39, a couple chapters later, we see that when he arrived in Egypt, God gave Joseph a ton of opportunities. Things probably seemed to be looking good for Joseph. Things were looking up. Things were happening in Joseph's life. And then all of a sudden, when things began to look up for Joseph, he faced a new set of difficulties. Can you imagine what Joseph must have been experiencing when he was being preyed upon by powerful people, when he had no one to turn to, when he was abandoned by the people who thought that they were his allies, and when he realized that he was going to be thrown into jail unjustly? I mean, if I were Joseph, if you were Joseph, what would you do? Give up? Would you want to punch someone? Would you trust God? I mean, I have no idea what it is that I would have done. I mean, I go through bad days. I experience bad times. There's situations that I experienced that haven't always been perfect. And it's even in those moments, if I could be vulnerable for a second, it's even in those moments where I say, yo, God, where are you at? Like, God, I mean, I'm trying to do the best that I can. I'm trying to live my life to please you, and everything seems to be going wrong. For you, I've got schoolwork, I've got stress at home, I've got drama with friends, I've got my parents don't trust me, and I've got all of these things going on. I mean, think about Joseph here for a second and everything that he's experiencing. But this isn't even the end of the misfortunes of Joseph. In Genesis chapter 39, verse 20 to 23, Joseph continued to live in the prison for years, forgotten about by Pharaoh and his own family. You see, there was even a point in his life where Joseph even was able to get free, but his opportunity was lost once again, and he was forgotten about. When Joseph was in this position, he had every reason to lose hope, but he didn't. Everything seemed to be going wrong. And Joseph wasn't sure that he would make it out of prison, or if God would ever fulfill the promise of making Joseph a ruler of a nation. But here's what I love about this story, and here's what I hope that you get from this story, is that Joseph knew that God was still with him. And can I let you know that no matter what you're going through, no matter what situations you're facing, no matter how things may seem heavy upon you, no matter it feels like the walls are closing in upon you, can I let you know that no matter what you're going through, God is still with you? While he was waiting, God had a plan. God was faithful. God was listening. And in all that time, God never gave up on Joseph. So Joseph never gave up on God. And if you're waiting on God right now, don't give up, because God's not giving up on you either. You might be thinking, that sounds good, but how? How do I not give up, Pastor Ruben? How do I not throw in the towel? How do I not just quit and say, forget everything that has to do with my relationship with God? Forget it all, because I mean, things are just going crazy right now in my life. How do I find hope when things feel hopeless? How do I hang on when I feel like I'm alone? I want to give you 5 ideas, 5 things that you can do. Number 1 is this: talk to God and don't stop. Don't stop talking to God. Like we talked about last week, like Ms. Dell talked about last week, tell God how you feel. Tell God what it is that you're experiencing. Then ask for help to hold on. Number 2, talk to other people. Joseph had been abandoned and alone, but you're not. Even when you feel it like it sometimes. The reality is, on top of your friends and family, you have people that care about you, that want to talk to you. And if you ever feel like you're overwhelmed, if you ever feel like you're hopeless, I want to encourage you, as an open invitation, come talk to me and Ms. Dell. We're ready to walk through that situation with you. Number 3, remember, God is stronger than you think. You see, when Joseph was sold into slavery, never could he have guessed the opportunities that God would give him in Egypt. When he was in prison, he had no idea what it was that God had in store for him in his future. When he was betrayed by his brothers, he couldn't have any idea of how God was going to restore those relationships. You see, God did all of those things and more. It's the same God that's telling you right now not to give up. You see, God is stronger than you think. Number 4, remember that you are stronger than you think. You were made in the image of God. You're wonderfully created by the Creator, and He designed you for a purpose. You're strong, you're capable, you're resilient, and when your strength fails, and sometimes it will, when your strength fails, remember that in your weakness, God is made strong on your behalf. And the last one, choose hope. Hope isn't just something that happens to us many ways. It's something that we can choose. We choose hope when we fill our mind up with what's good and what's true. We choose hope when we choose to talk about our struggles and not handle them all alone. We choose hope when we talk to God and we tell Him how much we need the help. We choose hope when we decide that no matter what, I'm not going to give up. We choose hope. So as we close out this series, I hope you find in the stories that we've shared about the people, about the men and women of God that waited on God, I hope that when you look at Abraham and Sarah, you're reminded that God has a plan, even if you have to maybe wait for it. Like Paul and Silas, we remind us that while we're waiting, God is still faithful. David reminds us that while we're waiting, God is listening. And even today, as we talked about the story of Joseph, he reminds us that while we're waiting, we can't give up because God hasn't given up on us. So no matter what you're waiting for right now, no matter what it is that you're holding on to, keep trusting God because God's not finished with you yet.